Well, greeting everyone. This is Fadi, and I'm welcoming all of you, of course, to not only a continuation of this fascinating series about the origin of the name Muhammad, but today we will wrap up this fascinating series as well with our dear brother Mel. And so far we have, I would say, I don't want to take the credit for it. We, meaning like by bringing in Mel, were able through his amazing work and research and the evidence that we've shown you so far to prove to you that there is some confusion going on. If you really want to apply the term Muhammad or Ahmed to Muhammad, you have a lot of explaining to do. But if you apply it to Jesus, even if you're using the Quran, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So that's where the tension now that you have to deal with, whether you are a Muslim or someone maybe who is sold out on the idea that Islam indeed is a divine religion sent by a God called Allah through a prophet named Muhammad. If that's your thinking, I think this series should change your mind, or at least change your stance. Well, Mel, welcome back, and it looks like this time we're going to wrap it up. And I think one of the things that you are going to address here is that Muhammad is the origin of all versions of Muhammad, and was just a title or a name, maybe either or.
Yeah. So yes, I think this is the kind of a great way to wrap things up. Obviously, people think of Muhammad as a name, but I would suggest that originally was a title that became eventually a name once the tradition grew legs, as it were, in the 8th and 9th centuries. Okay, so it's good to refer to Karl-Heinz Holig, who suggests that Muhammad was just one of a number of titles. He says that in other sources cited by Ibn Sa'id in the same chapter, up to 6 other names are mentioned, of which Muhammad was only one. According to Ibn Sa'd, 6 names are reported in 2 sources. In other sources, it is 3 and 5 names. According to them, the Prophet himself said that he had 6 names: Muhammad, the blessed praised one; Ahmed, the highly praised one; Hatim, the seal; Hasir, the awakener of the dead; Akib, the last prophet or concluder; and Mahi, the redeemer of sins, also the one who's awakened to life,
By the
and
way,
the eraser of sins.
Yeah, Mahi is a powerful description because he's the one who removes sin. And this should be a divine title, not a personal. But I want to share a funny thing. Ibn Sa'd, by the way, and his historical writing, Muslims, sometimes scholars attack him and claim that he is not reliable. Go figure.
Yeah, because he's obviously embarrassing because he's revealing too much.
Yeah,
it goes on to say that all of these are theologically significant names which would fundamentally fit Jesus more easily. I think that's really obvious when you look at it there. I don't remember Muhammad forgiving people's sins or rising from the dead or anything like that. I think it, and as all the things we mentioned before, it fits very much with Jesus. If we go a little bit further then, he says that Elwas Springer would be agreed with when he concludes with reference to the reports. In these traditions, Muhammad appears in the same way as the rest of the other names, as an epithet of the prophet and not as a proper name. So that's interesting that it actually was used as a title and not as a proper name. To sum up, he already opined that Muhammad was a title and not a proper name. I think that's crucial to understand. Now, moving on from there, we can see that actually all the various versions of Muhammad's name can be traced back to the original Mehmed. So we have Mehmet, and you'll see that still in places like Turkey. Mahometus, which is the Latin version of it. Mahomet, which is found in French texts centuries later, and of course Muhammad. Now, we can't trace all these other names from Muhammad, but we certainly can from Mehmed. And so I think that is very revealing, and it indicates that Mehmed was used for centuries before Muhammad became the established main name for Muhammad. If we look at the story of the elephant that went to Mecca, we also notice that his name was Mahmud, which again relates actually to Mahmed, which is kind of funny when we think about it. Now, Oleg has something really eye-opening here. He suggests that the term Mahmed Jesus was current up until 750 AD. Okay, so this is like the missing link between the old tradition and the new tradition. He says that here the Messiah is Jesus, son of Mary, servant of God, prophet, messenger, the Word and the Spirit of God. At least up until this time, i.e. around 700 AD, probably even until 750 AD, the term Muhammad Jesus was current. I don't know if you want to react to that, Al.
Well, I mean, it speaks for itself. In fact, I'm glad you had the cover here of the book. I encourage people to go and buy it and read it for themselves. I mean, you're just quoting from it. And Oleg, by the way, is a renowned scholar, German scholar. And he also contributed to some of the discoveries related to the Sana manuscript, if my memory serves me right.
Yeah, fantastic scholar. So he's actually coming to the same conclusion that I have, independent of each other. I was leading into this conclusion, and then as someone shared this source from his book, and I thought, oh wow, he's actually saying the same thing. So he believes that Mahmed in the Quran is referring to Jesus, and over the course of the 8th century, it gradually changed from being about Jesus to being about an Arabian prophet, as we've been saying throughout this series.
Yeah, and the 750 is significant, by the way, Mel, because it has to do with this later development of Islam and Abdul Malik and Al-Walid and Abbasides, and kind of like, if we take the standard Islamic narrative, 750 is the transition between two dynasties, the Umayyads to the Abbasides, but here it would have been within the realm of Abdul Malik and Al-Walid and the early inception or origin of a religion known as Muhammad. And you can see the confusion about trying to apply some of the titles to the new character now.
Yeah, I think the Abbasids were really crucial in dropping the idea of it being connected with Jesus, and then you have the Arabian prophets from then on. And I think this is where the Persian influence became all the more stronger as the years passed by, and it became less Christological and more about an Arabian prophet. So just to kind of conclude then, Mahmed, the term that we call today Muhammad, but if we go back to the original, it functioned both as a reference to God. So if we think about that Jewish inscription in the 6th century, referring to the Jewish God as highly praised, the term Mahmed was used in Sabaik. It applied to Jesus in the 7th century coins with crosses and even a fish. It applied to Jesus in the Qur'an, and we saw plenty of evidence for that. And it was used as a messianic epithet, okay, or a title. This later got reinterpreted and applied to an Arabian prophet. Vestiges of the earlier meaning are still evident in the Islamic traditions that refer to Adam being created from the light of Muhammad. So, from my perspective, I think this all makes perfect sense if we look beyond the standard Islamic narrative and actually just see how things happened over time through the centuries. I think we can see that really the Quran was talking about Jesus when it refers to Mahmed. I think Muslims have a lot of thinking to do about all of this information, and they have to really evaluate whether they are devoting their life to something that is actually true or something where they've been misled.
That's right. And I think if we were to take this approach, it makes perfect sense why the alleged last through chapters of the Quran, chapter 5, which is anti-Trinitarian or polemic against the Trinity, and chapter 9, where it claims now the Christians and the Jews are heretics and they're idolaters. You can see that at some point, this view was fixated, and now you needed something to back it up with, and the pagans are prohibited from going to Mecca because now you have the center of religion down south. So this definitely makes perfect sense how you can find Jesus being favored all along in the Quran until you get to that point.
Yeah, they obviously had to I would say, add certain things, not only just reinterpret. I think they must have seen the need to actually add extra verses, perhaps even a couple of surahs,
Exactly.
to make sense of it. And I know you've been looking at the Sana manuscript. Perhaps you could say something about the pamphlet set that you've been looking at, because I think that's also evidence that they've been editing the tradition even in the text of the Quran itself.
Yeah, I'm going to share what people can easily discover. Basically, we're talking about a palimpsest here, where the chapter that I'm looking at, technically speaking, is chapter 9, for instance, but it does have a number of chapters in it, known as the Sana manuscripts, was discovered by German scholars, and back in the 70s and early 80s, they took digital, basically, photos of that, and it's been studied by many people up until our days. Of course, I am one of those that are looking at these images as well. You can see that the lower layer that was erased, when you look at it using ultraviolet lighting, which also is available for people to look at those images, it does not match today's Quran. And even when you look at the upper layer that allegedly was written to fix the problem, it still has some differences. But some would argue that those differences match with what we call the canonical readings or variant readings. But all that to say is, if we look at the oldest writings of the Quran, it has changed. Somebody later decided to change and didn't like it. In fact, you have someone like Ibn Mujahid who claimed that the writings and versions of the Quran by Ibn Mas'ud and Ubay are considered to be shawad or heretical. Oh my goodness, these are the two scribes of Muhammad. So how can you reconcile things like this? Because the hadith told me that they are. If you want to learn the Quran, go and learn it from these people. So it proves to us that if the traditional story about Uthman is correct, which, by the way, there are so many versions of it, just go and look at Theodore Nildaki's basically writings on that in the history of the Quran. Multiple versions of who started. Was it Abu Bakr? Was it Omar? Was it Uthman? Was it all of them? If we take this seriously, then we can claim that Uthman was the founder and the basically perfecter of the Quran, assuming he perfected it, because Ibn Mujahid 300 years later discovered that there are still other readings making their way into the community.
Yes, it's a major problem. I think a lot of the editing that went on in those decades was all to do with the fact that the traditions are changing and the Quran is now out of date, as it were. It was originally focused on Jesus. Now they want to refocus on this Arabian prophet. They've got a problem because the Quran is contradicting them, so they have to do a lot of editing to try and make it fit this new tradition.
Exactly. That's an excellent point. Excellent point, that part of the editorial process was to rewrite the Quran, technically speaking.
Yeah. So I think now that we've seen the big picture and we see how the term Mahmed was used, where it came from originally, that that it originally had the sense of Messiah and it's now being used about an Arabian prophet. I think now it's really clear what's been going on. It makes perfect sense that the Quran had to be edited, but they didn't do a good enough job because they left enough evidence there for us to see what really happened. And I'm sure over the coming years we're going to find an awful lot more out about this. But it's been a real eye opener, particularly for me, to see the Jewish inscription from the 6th century referring to God as Mahmed, as the highly praised. I think that's a bit of a game changer there. It kind of contradicts the traditions quite a lot.
Absolutely. Well, brother, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating video series. I look forward to doing more of this with you in hopefully the near future. Everybody should really share these series that we've been doing with Mel. Mel is known for doing this type of research. Now, whether you agree or disagree with him, all we ask is do it in an academic way. Don't come and attack. Just present evidence, and Mel has always been open to reconsidering if there is something maybe that was misinterpreted or something that was not really as clear, or maybe something that is subject to being researched again. He's open for that. He doesn't come here and say it's set in stone. No, there is room for always re-examining the evidence. But so far, according to my understanding and according to my basically relationship with him and my experience, is that most of the time, the evidence that he brings to the table are very damaging, and no one can refute them in a decisive manner. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, everyone. This is Al Fadi, over and out. God bless.